Alrighty. Okay. Cool. Um, one screen is so limiting. I'll tell you what. Um, all right. All right. So this session, we're going to be looking at the fundamentals. There's a lot of builders coming into the space from like architecture and arts and pre-visualization and all these other categories that they don't really look into the game dev side. So if you're looking at metaverse, and this applies to many of them, either Unreal, Unity, and all the rest of it, all of these are basically created using a game engine, which means that you need to use the game development pipeline, which is a whole category in itself, and there's a lot of things to it. But if you're coming in from other environments, like there's a lot of language and vocabulary that kind of gets thrown around a lot, that a lot of people don't understand. So I'd like to sort of cover some of those things today, and hopefully to improve the understandings of what I'm talking about half the time, but also when other people are throwing around what we're looking at. So, on that, I'm going to be jumping between sort of all of the different tools that I have in all in order to sort of try and keep on top of that. Feel free to drop a message, probably in the YouTube is easier. I've got that to the left there. A lot of this session, we're going to sort of jump on the like a typing situation, and I'll look at some examples on Blender as well as we go along. But let's jump in. So let's have a look. Game development 101. There we go. So when you're coming into an asset, the main thing that you're going to look at is how do you create 3D assets and put them in Unity and then on the web. Now, Unreal doesn't really support WebGL, so we're not really focusing on that, but a lot of the same things apply depending on the metaverse, the game, the creation that you're doing. Hey, Johnny, can you hear me? I just want to make sure. I don't want to, I've been talking for the last 20 minutes and no one can hear me. So say yes if you can hear me perfectly fine. Or not, up to you. There could be lag. I don't know. Like the internet's pretty good here. I'm actually not bad. Excellent, fantastic. All right, so let's have a look. Game development 101. Let's make that a nice heading. Right, so basically the first stage that you'll be looking at is kind of twofold, I guess you could say. So the first part, you might look at the concept. Now, depending on your approach, this depends on each person. So some people might use just a quick sketch. Some people might go into like Blender or even Unity, for example, and do a block out. Now, a sketch, of course, is literally that. Like everyone knows a sketch. You'll draw it. You probably do a floor plan. You'll do some different ideas, do some isometric stuff, whatever your approach is there, just to get a feel mentally of the space that you're going to create. It also depends on if you have a clear plan. So some people will go in and like literally block out the space in like just using boxes so they can get a feel for the environment for their character. So if you're looking at like a first person shooter, like especially it's very important where the feel of the level is more important than the look of the level because you have to get line of sight and all those sorts of things. Less important for metaverse unless you're sort of doing some interesting stuff like that, but you do want to get like the scale of it right. So you want to get the seats the right size and the rooms feeling good to the right size that you want. So I definitely recommend, like, if anything, even if you're jumping straight in, a block out is pretty important. I did that with my karaoke space the other day, where it's all just white basic objects in Blender. Imported that into Unity and yeah, get a good feel for this is how I want my space to be. Give me a second, I'm gonna get a water. I'm going to be talking a lot this session, so best be prepared. All right. So we got the sketch now. Block out. So let's do this. Let's do some cool stuff with this. So sketch. Usually sort of on a book, but a block out could be in Blender, of course, 3D Studio Max, all the rest of them. Or it could be Unity with basic blocks. So Unity does have access to like cube and a sphere and all that sort of stuff. That said, I wouldn't recommend using those assets in your final. So that's why I will usually sort of start in Blender, make the assets that you want, and then import them. And then when you update, like you save over the top of those assets, they will update automatically. So Unity is really good in that aspect where you have an asset, you save over the top of it, and then it will update automatically in Unity. So that saves a bit of time with that. So my recommendation, can I do a tick? Let's do it. That's kind of a tick. Just imagine the left bit is not there. So I will usually sort of go on the Blender approach on the block out. So I'm going to put that in bold. That's my approach. One thing I've noticed from a lot of people coming into the Discord is you'll get, and this is not a problem with the builder, this is just an understanding element, but you get these sort of very open questions where it's just like, how do I optimize my objects? And it's like, that depends on the objects. So there's a lot of questions that come up with how do I do this, but there's a lot of questions that need to happen before that because you need to be asking the right question. So how do I optimize my asset is not a correct question because there are many questions that you need to ask before that. So let's move on a little bit. So the problem there is there's 10 different ways to do any particular skill. And the one that you choose depends on the asset that you are going to create. So if it's a hero asset, then you can put more polygons and normal maps and materials in that asset. If you don't know what those are, that's fine. We'll get to those later. But if it's like just a lamp that's going to be on the top of the ceiling that's very small, then that can be quite low polygon because no one's ever going to look at it really. Like I want to see it and it's like, that is a lamp, but I'm not going to look up and it's like, okay, why aren't there more polygons in this asset? So I did a quick example just as a quick summary of what we're looking at. So if I go into wireframe mode, you can see the polygon count is quite high with these two sets. So the ones at the back is quite high and the ones at the front is much lower. If you're looking at a hero asset, then you would probably have something like this. If I'm going to walk up to it, I want to be able to see that curve and it's going to look all right. But if I'm getting smaller, like that's really, really small and I don't need that many polygons. So I would use something like this on a smaller asset. So if I go to this, they actually look kind of the same, but the poly count is significantly, like I think it's at least half this, but the result is the same, depending on if you're using normal maps and low poly topology and all that sort of stuff. So this is a good example where if you're looking at a larger object, this is too low polygon. But if you're looking at a smaller asset, this is too high. So this is one of the many questions that you need to look at when looking at the how do I create my asset. So that's the polygon count. The other part is how many textures or materials. Now this answer will always be as few as possible. Each material creates a draw call, and a draw call is Unity going to the computer, hey, draw this. Now this basically comes down to how many objects, how many unique objects, and how many materials. And basically you want to keep that as low as possible. And there's all sorts of different ways that you can reduce the amount of draw calls. That's a higher end topic than we're going to look at today, but draw calls are the things that slow things down, or one of the many things that slow things down. So we want to keep that in there as well. All of this basically comes down to, how do I make my frame rate as good as possible? That's it. So I think for a desktop experience, the minimum you would probably want, and Richard, feel free, or Alv, anyone, feel free to jump in and say, like, I think the minimum is for a social environment that you're not running around and doing sort of very active things, the minimum you want is a 50 frames per second. If you're looking at like a faster, like a running or action-oriented space, then you're looking at maybe 60 as a minimum. Eventually, once we start looking at virtual reality and mobile, virtual reality has the unfortunate requirement of a minimum of 90 frames a second. Anything less than that, and you actually have a very uncomfortable experience. And that's why if you're using a Quest 2 on the headset alone, not through a computer, a lot of the graphics, a lot of the graphics in Quest 2 games are a lot lower than what you would find on a desktop, because they need to push that 90 frames a second on basically a mobile device. If you're streaming from a desktop, you can get much better quality because the desktop is doing all the power, but you have to buy, a good computer to do that. So yeah, there's a lot of elements when it comes down to what is your frame rate that you want, and yeah, minimum is 30. But for a good experience, I would say 50 is a good one to aim for. Any less than that is like, okay, how can I optimize this? But the thing is also, like, a lot of builders have pretty high-end computers, but say, for example, if you want your audience to be everybody, you have to consider people with a work laptop, for example, that doesn't have the graphics card to be able to push those frames that your 5950X with a 3090 Ti can push. So there's definitely a different process in regards to what is your target market, who do you want to use, do you want it to work eventually on VR or mobile, for example. So there's a lot of different things there. Alv has mentioned 50 frames per second is hardware dependent. So the target should be, 15.24 milliseconds. What the hell? It's very specific. So the target should be 15.24 milliseconds for 50 frames per second on all hardware. 9.144 milliseconds for 30 frames per second. The problem with this is I'm not technical enough to understand the milliseconds. I've always been frames per second, just because that's where I come from. I'm the designer type. This is programming language. There is no spec. You want that. And that's the thing. Like, you could, sure, if you want to do 15 frames per second, you can, but I wouldn't recommend it. So there's that. So basically what it comes down to, a lot of the choices that we're making purely comes down to, how do I make my space look as good as I can with 50 frames or more? Yeah. 50. Coming from Japan, where I have to teach the difference between 50 and 15 very clearly is an interesting thing. But that's basically what we're doing. So yeah, how do we get the quality and the frame rate where we want it? And in WebGL, and this is the other part of the puzzle, WebGL is a bit of a downgrade, like quite a downgrade from client-based AAA games, because we're running on a browser, and WebGL is a bit older. There are new things coming out, but they're early, so we'll get there eventually. But we're not going to get ray tracing or anything like that anytime soon, just because WebGL is WebGL. So those are the three things we're looking at: a high quality space on a reasonable frame rate on WebGL so that it works in a browser. Meaning no one has to download anything. You can just literally give them a link and you've got access to a 3D world, which is great and amazing and super cool. So, moving forward, there's no short answer to any of these things. That's the problem. It's like, this is a 3-year degree for a reason. Anyway, so let's say we have an idea of our space and what we want to do. One of the big questions will come down to how big versus how small, because the bigger it is, the lower quality it has to be because you have to put so much stuff in it. A smaller space could be higher quality because you can put those polygons into that space. So it's kind of like a interesting. Why is this a slinky? A slinky is coming to my head, but yeah, stretching a slinky out. So the bigger it is, the lower quality your assets need to be, like smaller polygon counts and draw calls, depending on how you want to do that. There are some techniques that we could look into about like trim sheets and stuff like that. But yes, once again, these are the balancing choices that we need to make every step of the way. But the size of your space is definitely one of them. So size of the assets and size of your total space plays a big part in these decisions. Okay, so let's say we have what's an example? Throw out some examples, people. What do we want to toy with as our space? What we could do my karaoke room. There's always that. Yes, the slinky, the now coined slinky process. That I'm 100% sticking to that. It's great. I like it. Toys, like a toy shop. That's a lot of assets, man. A lot of prefabs though, so you could use that. Okay. So let's have a quick look. I'm going to pull up my karaoke bar, karaoke space. Was it this one? I guess we'll find out. A jumping castle. Yeah. Different jumping castles. So the karaoke space, I'm going to be using portals or artifacts to help branch between like higher quality spaces. So I can go to a door, click on that, and then go to another space that has like once again using that space more optimized so it looks better, for example. So I don't think many people have been using this as a tool to create larger spaces where anything behind a door could be a new location or a portal or an artifact that links to a new page. So we can do a lot of that sort of stuff if we need to. So let's have a look. Right. So this is, mostly block out for the part. So I made all of this basically in Blender, and these halls will have doors to new rooms. So I don't have to worry about them for now. I just wondered about the party room. Now, one approach to building assets is a modular approach. So I've got this sofa, and I got this sofa, and I got this sofa. So I could create that as one asset, or I could create a single element and a corner element, and then use prefabs, which is kind of like a tool in Unity that creates one asset, and then when you put it into the space, it will make instances of that. So it's a lot less work on the CPU and the graphics card, for example. So prefabs are very useful. That's a lot of options. Soccer field's super easy. That's like up, lane, and 2 goals. Too easy. Too low level. Sewer system? I mean, what? Really? Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle sewer system and their house. That'd be cool. I 100% could do that. Okay. Anyway, so let's look into the next phase. So asset creation. would be the next stage. Now, asset creation is huge. There are so many different ways to do it. There are so many different techniques. And this is where let's say, what would you say? Half of your skills need to be focused on for this. And this is broken up into different categories, depending on what you need to do. So I'm going to cover all of them, but not all of them are needed. So if you're not going to do animation, you don't need to do that, of course. So let's have a look. First, you need to model. I've forgotten my little dash. There we go. Now, modeling can be done in a lot of different applications. I use Blender because it's free and amazing. But a lot of architects, for example, will come from Revit or what was the other one? Rhino. The problem with those two is those aren't really game dev tools. Those are more architectural tools, and that's great. But getting those assets into a game environment, they usually don't consider polygon count at all. So I think Rhino 7 have just introduced a remesh tool, which is very, very useful. That said, you could import an asset from Rhino or Revit into Blender and use some of their remesh tools as well. I haven't done this, but I will be looking into a tutorial on how to do this because it's very important. There have been many spaces that have the poly count is way too high, and once again, that will reduce your frame rate significantly. So yes, getting that poly count down to something reasonable is pretty important to having a space run well. So it can look good, but it would run bad, and that therefore makes the end result bad. So modeling is part of it. Now, you could use ZBrush if you're looking at high polygon sculptures, but once again, the poly count there is too high. That said, ZBrush does have remesh tools that are actually pretty good. So there's a lot of these things that play a part in the modeling process. Usually, depending on the asset that you're creating, you'll look at a high polygon and a low polygon. The low polygon or medium polygon, depending on the asset, is the important one. But what you can do, and this is a whole skill in itself, is you can bake the high polygon information onto a low polygon texture. And this is what you call normal map. So normal map is kind of like bump maps in a way. But the graphics card, I think, will process that in a way that it gives you the lighting on like a bump approach. And that will make it look really, really good while keeping the file size much lower. So that's a definitely useful technique for, what would you call, detailed assets. But if you're looking at just a normal asset that has a material that is like just a metal or a marble, then you can unwrap your object, and we'll look at unwrapping in a second, to keep that tiled material looking really good on your asset. So once again, 10 different ways to do the same thing. How are we going so far? All right. So let's go back a bit to modeling. So let's say you've made your model. You've made a chair. After that, you will need to unwrap it. So let's say we're gonna stick to a basic model. We're not going to do the high end stuff. We'll worry about that in a second. But we're going to unwrap it. Just watch it again. It'll be fine. It makes more sense the second time. So unwrapping a model is basically telling the computer, how do I apply my texture or my material onto an asset? So if I have, let's do this one. So let's go to add mesh cube. Hide everything else. Bye. Okay. So if I look at UV editing here, this box comes with an unwrapped texture sort of thing, an unwrapping, a wrapping. I don't know what you call the base thing. So this comes with that. So if I wanted to grab this and put like 1, 2, 3, that would be on the faces here. Now this is just a 6-sided object and very, very simple. But if I was looking at, can I unhide everything? Nope. There we go. But if you're looking at a complex object, something like this, and I go, hide, it looks a lot more complicated. Now, the thing is also, these might warp or do other certain things. So there's different ways to unwrap an asset. So in this case, for example, I could what they call unwrap it. So I'm going to grab that, make sure I can grab all of that, and then go unwrap. And here is an example of what happens because of how I've unwrapped it. So here you would get sort of a problem with scaling because here the squares are very, very small, but here it's very, very big. So if you put a simple tiled asset on this, it wouldn't look very good. So you have to figure out ways to unwrap your asset. So in this case, let's try mark seam. And then we have that. So as you can see, it's still not as good, but you could play around with these. Now, curved objects are the hardest to do well. And I would probably have kept the original, but now we're sort of getting where everything's the same. That said, that is probably the best. So it depends on what you're building, I guess you could say. Another approach is this one. So I'm going to mark seam, and I'm going to get rid of that seam. And then you have that, which looks a lot better. So different assets require different unwrapping techniques. Now, when it comes to like a square or a cube or rectangular object, these are much easier because why does it disappear? That's just weird. Okay, I'm going to do this. I'm going to add a new one. So if you do that. Now, an easy way to do unwrapping with simple objects would be to grab all of the things, once again, through see-through, and then just go UV, Smart UV Project, what angle it is, go OK, and then you have this sort of asset here. All of these faces are the same size, and then you get a really good texture when you put your material on it. So that's definitely one approach. So once again, whole category, typing in unwrapping in Blender, unwrapping in 3D Studio Max, unwrapping in whatever application you want. We'll give you plenty of tutorials in YouTube on how to do that. Okay, let me check the chat for a sec. So Johnny, I'm going to go with no is the the answer to that one. Okay. I think, and if anyone can tell me, because I'm not sure, but I think Revit and Rhino doesn't have unwrapping tools. I don't think you can tweak them in there. So that's a limitation of those as well. So that's another reason to take your asset into Blender and then modify the thing there. Right. So that's unwrapping. After that, I guess you could do texturing. Now I was talking with Sam, the videographer in the team, and he's learning a lot of this sort of stuff as we go. And there is a bit of a difference between a texture and a material in Unity. So a texture is the 2D image that you will apply to an object. So unwrapping will kind of tell the model where to put that texture. So I will find that sometimes if it's a simple if it's a simple material, I won't create that in Blender. I will just trust that I've got the unwrapping correct and then apply the materials in Unity. But if I want my material to be something specific on the asset, then I will create a material in Blender, which can be quite easy to a point. So let's say we've got our asset there. I'm going to go down to this thing here, material, this one. Go new, material, just for really obvious reasons, and then go to shading. And shading will be what the material is on the asset. So I'm going to go texture, image texture, put that there. And then I will open let's go one of my builds, Mono Playground, for example. We have a bunch of tutorials textures here. So let's use a 1024, open image. And then you need to left click from color to base color, like so. And then you will see how the texture has been applied on the tool up here. Now notice how this one, the second one, does not do that. You need to go to the third one or the fourth one if need be. But I usually this one because it has better automatic lighting. So as you can see, we have our asset and the UV maps are kind of showing where the polygons are. So this is a good example of what UV unwrapping does for the material. So if I use this on a material in Unity, then that is the result. So texturing. Okay. So once you have your model that is unwrapped with the texture and basically looking how you want, eventually you might actually get into animation. Now, depending on the complexity of your animation, you could do animation in Unity. You could also do animation in Blender and then import that into Unity. So there's two different approaches. If you're looking at a complex object like a character or a snake or a slinky, you would probably have to look at using bones to animate the asset. So that is called rigging and skinning, I guess. So rigging is setting up the bone structure, and skinning is applying your asset to that bone structure. Once again, optional. I'm going to put that in there. Generally speaking, you probably won't need to do that unless you have a very specific requirement of your asset. So there's that. Animation, also optional. So animation would be, just animation. Most people know what that one is, luckily, because movies have had that for a very long time. So basically, it could be movement, scale, rotation. You can also use blend shapes. So let's go into some of those, that language. Hang on. Let's do hydration on this one. Okay. So what can we animate? We can animate the transform. For example, position, rotation, and scale. You could animate the rig if you've made it. You could animate the blend shapes. Now, different programs have different names for this. Blender calls them blend shapes. Richard, if you're still there, what do they call it in 3D Studio Max? I forget. Still there? No? Anyway. Basically, what this does is if you have, how would you even, okay, let's have a quick look. So let's make a quick blend shape. How do I do this again? I forget. Shape keys. All right. So let's say we have a basis and then we have a key 1. So I'm going to grab this and then move it over here. Done. There. So when I move this, basically there is an animated number or parameter that goes between shapes. So when it comes to like animation in movies and video games, you'll use these for facial shapes, so smiling and angry and all those sort of things. You can use them for all sorts of stuff. So they're very, very useful and interesting to create your asset. What is that one back here? Morph targets, that's the one. Okay. Thank you. It's been a while. And let's put shape keys, just because that's what that was used when doing so. So yeah, most, once again, 3D Studio Max, Maya, Blender have the ability to create these assets, and you can, once you export those as an FBX, you therefore have access to them. Now, if I recall, it will be sort of up here. So you'll have a category that's not here. No, this one. This one. Yeah. So in the mesh renderer, I believe it'll have blend shapes, and then you can animate those as well. You could use Reactor. You could do all sorts of strange stuff in Mona using those animation tools. So super interesting, not used enough. Okay, so what do we got? Modeling, unwrapping, texturing, rigging, skinning, animation. Anything else in the basic animation category? No. But let's go a few more on modeling. So you can do high poly or high polygon modeling, but that needs to go onto low polygon. Or of course you could just go low polygon. So many different approaches to that, but the goal is low polygon. Otherwise, the frames will not be in your favor. Now, modeling, let's go into this category a bit more. Getting a high polygon model onto a low polygon model will require a thing called baking. What baking means is basically projecting high polygon information onto a low polygon asset and putting that into the texture. So you'll have a normal map texture that keeps the information that the high polygon asset. So if you've ever seen a game character, for example, these will always use a baking to create the wrinkles and the scars and sometimes the beard, and all of the details on the clothes. So anything that doesn't get affected by the silhouette will probably be baked into the texture. And that's how you get really high quality assets with really low polygon counts. So that's called baking. So that's one part there. Okay. So that's asset creation, animation, anything else? Am I missing anything else? Okay. When it comes to vocabulary of modeling, I will throw around a lot of the following when I'm creating a lot of these things. So say, for example, we have this asset here. Some of the things I will use is edge loop. So basically, this has got an edge. So edge, edge, edge. And if you use Alt and left click, you'll select the edge loop. So that will go to the point, also around there, for example. If you're doing characters, this is very important because the animation, especially the shoulder or the fingers, the edge loop is how it animates. Now, if you're doing a couch, less important. But still, it's a good thing to do because by selecting edge loops, I can easily add an edge loop between two edge loops if I wanted to sort of create these sort of assets. So edge loops are a very good, what would you call it, habit to form when creating assets because it will make your life easier in the long run. So a little bit of time to create a nice edge loop model will save a lot more time in the model progresses. It also allows you to sort of go up and down in quality, so it's very easy to reduce a polygon asset if I wanted to, just by sort of selecting every second loop. So having the right number of loops is very important. And let's get rid of these ones as well. And then go delete, dissolve edges. And then we have like a much lower polygon asset. Now, you might want to do this as part of the optimization approach because of what we call level of detail. Yes, so what Richard said. So edge loops are important in hard surface to get a correct surface approximation as well as making editing and unwrapping easier. Correct, 100%. So language that we use a lot, edge loops. Yeah, that's it. But very important. So yeah, when I was using the unwrapping tools before, like I will always create seams on edge loops. So having neat edge loops really helps every part of the modeling and unwrapping and animation. So it's a very good technique to get into the habit of creating good edge loops. So there's that. What else is I guess we should also like vertex or vertices. There's each of those. Very important for this sort of editing. An edge is usually each one of these, and of course a polygon or a face is the main one here. These are like basic understanding of modeling tools, and you will use all three of them quite a lot for that. So make sure to get those down. So let's actually put that above this. So we've got vertex, and then we've got edge, and then we've got face or polygon, I guess. Now, small note with the labeling of polygons, a polygon is two triangles put together, so a square, if you will. Depending on what you're building, sometimes they'll be using tris, so each triangle, rather than a polygon. For some reason, I'm not really sure why, but for some reason, polygons is the standard rather than triangles or tris. This has been around for a very long time. So ever since, I'm just going back on a memory lane in regards to when we had the first 3D card back in the day, where polygons were like very low. But yeah, so for some reason we use polygons. Triangles. In Mona, we've used sort of triangles a lot because there is a simple tool that I found on the asset store that shows how many triangles your asset has, which is important when trying to figure out how good an asset is or if it's too many polygons. So polygons, you could easily just double the triangle count, and that's a rough approximation. Another one you might hear, actually, I'll put this in here. So we got tris or triangles that I can't spell. polygons, and then another one you may hear is n-gons. Now, an n-gon is basically a polygon that is more than two triangles. So, for example, you might be a pentagon equivalent, and that is an n-gon. N-gons are generally not recommended, but of course, you will always have triangles and n-gons in the tight spots that complicate edge loops. So it's fine to have them in there, but it's good to try and get them out, if that makes sense. Once again, just for your sanity more than anything else. So we've got those three there. Okay. Okay. What else is there? What other terms come up? So UV. On that. So if you're looking at UV, to my knowledge, and I could be wrong, but UV is this direction. So in 3D, you have X, Y, Z, and different applications have different up directions. So I think 3D Studio Max and Unity don't have different up directions. So Unity, well, I know Blender Z is up. Richard, Mr. 3D Studio Max, which direction is up in 3D Studio? And I think Maya also plays different, and Unity plays different, and Unreal plays different. And it's really frustrating developing your assets to sort of figure this out. So there is certain elements of trying to line things up correctly, and it's very frustrating, but that's 100% a thing. Okay. Now, when it comes to texturing, basically you don't use XY, you use U and V. And you have the 0 to 1 asset that you're creating. Now, if you're baking an asset, your unwrapping has to be between 0 and 1. But if you're using a tileable material, so if you go to some of the resources on the docs, let's do that as a quick look. So if you go to resources and go to textures and go to any of these, if you click on any of these, you'll give these assets here. And here's a good look at what some of the things I've already mentioned have been. So the base color is just the color of your asset. The normal map is this sort of weird blue thing. Blue. So when it comes to that, the technical side of it is red, green, and blue. Each one is a different up direction, if you could call it that. You can actually do these manually. It's a bit messy, and you have to be more technical than me because I usually just bake my stuff. But it is possible to do some really cool, interesting stuff with that. Another thing that you look at is roughness and metallic. Now, these come down to our material. So if I create material, we have all of these things in our material type. So let's do this. Yeah, let's just put it there. So we can change the color if we want to. Now, usually metallic is either 0 or 1. You can actually go anywhere between, but usually it's not a 1. And then you have smoothness. Now, Unreal, of course, has roughness. Now, basically, a 1 or a white on a texture will be very smooth, like so. And you can sort of see the reflection in that. Whereas 0 or black is not very shiny. So you have that. And metallic sort of does interesting elements of that as well. If you go to the Mona Playground, so I think I have that somewhere. Hang on. Where is it? Mona Playground. I actually have done an example of the metallic and smoothness in the space. So let's make this bigger. Someone's already here. Over here. So as you can see, the top has metallic on 1, and the bottom is just smoothness, and then you have emissive down the bottom to make it glow. So you can have some examples of what you're looking at with that. Who is this? Okay. So that's materials in space. Yeah, let's go back here. So you got the color. Now, if you want to put a image, you just drag. I don't actually have any images on here, but you would drag it to this little square here. So in this case, it's just full green, but in this color, we're putting textures, and you can put those all down here. The normal map is this. This will usually come up with a problem saying fix now. A normal map is a special type of map. Or a special type of texture. So you have to make sure that it recognizes that it is a normal map. And when it comes to emission, which is the bloom effect, you can do that. And I don't usually go above 2. Otherwise, the glow will be really, really high. So you can definitely add that as well. So the techniques for materials and textures are all kind of interlinked in unique ways to create the assets that you want to make. So we got that. Okay, where's this? Okay, cool. All right, so vertex triangles map, modeling, unwrapping, texturing, and materials. So this is a 2D image, generally. And how would you call this? The material on the object. So resulting material in game. So I got those two. Cool. All right. So asset creation, modeling, unwrapping, texturing, rigging, skinning, optional, animation, optional. So that's about it for the asset creation. And once again, the very, very basic covering of each sort of element. Of course, if you have any questions with anything so far, feel free to throw it in the Discord when you get to this. So yeah. Okay. So once we have our assets created, then we need to put it into the game engine. And I sort of dabbled in a bit of this as well. But let's look at Unity, because Mona uses Unity. Now, we need to import them, or import the assets that were created. Then you need to create the materials. Now, when it comes to other assets like Blender, 3D Studio Max, it's actually quite tricky, if not impossible, unless you use like add-ons or plugins, to import the materials that you've made in the 3D asset tool into Unity as is. So usually I will use materials in the 3D asset tool purely so I can see what it's going to look like. But then I will make the material again in Unity and then create it according to Unity's specifications. Each tool looks different. So I find that the best results are just to create materials in Unity. Everything else in the 3 tool is just for show. Like, how does it look? Right. Okay, so that's your assets done. And you can place them as you need to. Now, real time, so lighting is probably the next big thing. And this is pretty big because real-time lights are very expensive on the frame rate. So the more real-time lights you have, especially with shadows, the asset will the space will start running sort of badly. There are ways around this if you're very technical, but generally speaking, we do recommend sort of 1 or 2 real-time lights, 3 or 4 if need be, but everything else will be light mapped. So less real-time, more light map. Now, light mapping basically takes the lighting situation that you've created and it will bake that lighting information into texture, which does affect file size somewhat, but the results are much better. So you can have like emissive on your materials will affect the environment. So if you have like neon lights and stuff, that will be baked into the scene. You can also have like unity lighting. So things like, what were they? So there were spotlights, directional lights. So spotlights is literally that, a spotlight facing in one direction. Directional light is a light facing one direction from everywhere. So a spotlight is like a cone. Directional is just one straight light going down. Point light is a point in space that projects light in all directions, and it has like a radius. And the other one, what's the other one? Area light, that's the one. Now, of course, these can be, these 3 can be real time, but you don't want them to be. Area light can only be baked. So let's say less real time because they are expensive. But they are dynamic. So the avatar, for example, can have a shadow that's running around and the shadow will move correctly. Light maps look better. So they are cheaper on the process, but they are static. So we have those elements. Let's get rid of that one. Don't need it, I guess. Yeah. Ah, man, I want my full keyboard back. Yeah. So I have lighting. Now, I do have tutorials on light mapping, both in Unity, which we recommend because there are some issues with Bakery. Bakery does better lighting and better packing of the second UV, which I should go into. Requires a second UV map. Okay. Now, when I say requires a second UV map, the light mapping applies that texture of lighting on a second UV. So in Blender, you'll create the first level UV for your texture, but Unity will require a second one. Now, this is quite easy to do automatically. So if you click on your model, and down here under the model, you'll have generate light map UVs there, and it does it for you. You can see these here. I've done a quick thing. So the problem with this is the light mapping in Unity Light Mapper is not as good as it could be. So there's a lot of space between these assets. Bakery does it better, but unfortunately, Bakery has, without a bit of tweaking, will import these light maps into the portals and the artifacts layer or scenes, which makes those files really big, even if they have nothing in them. So there are ways around it. I haven't explored that yet, but it has been said to be done. So I'll look into that. But there's other issues with if someone buys your space, they will need Bakery to have that, to use that information that you've included. So Yeah, there are complications. I'll say that much. All right. So yeah, requires second UV map. You can make it manually in Blender, 3D Studio Max, and all of those. You can bake the light map in those tools as well. But if you're putting all of your space together in Unity, then I personally find it very much easier just to do in Unity. So once again, 10 different ways to do it. Whatever's the quickest and easiest or best results, depending on the time, money, and resources you have. So there's all of that. So that's lighting, which is a whole category. After that, I would probably recommend reflection probes. Once again, this creates a tool, not a tool, this creates an asset that bakes the reflections of different areas into an asset. So when your asset that has metallic, especially, and smoothness runs into that environment, it will reflect that particular baked information. Once again, it's less expensive on the CPU or the frames per second, if you would like to focus on that. And that allows you to have really nice reflection effects. They have to be static. So let's put that in there. So they are static. So they don't reflect the character, for example, or dynamic objects. You can, but it gets expensive real quick. So we don't recommend dynamic reflection probes. But the result is really good, especially if you don't make like a mirror reflection. So you can make a smaller texture of a reflection probe, because that's what it gets the information is. It's actually a new texture. So it adds to the file size, but adjusting that to what you need it to be. Once again, smaller is better because the file size is limited to 180 meg. So we have that. I have a tutorial on that as well if you want to check that one out. After that, you can look at light probes. Light probes are, once again, a performance tool that takes a lot of the baked light information, especially if you're using emissives and spotlights and all that, and that affects the dynamic objects to be more accurate. So this sort of creates your assets to be blended into the environment better. I have a tutorial on this as well. So very, very useful for bringing the avatars especially, but any dynamic objects such as animation and things like that into the space. So that's just light probes. We don't need anything on that one. Okay. So what do we have? That's off the top of my head. That's kind of it. The basics anyway. After that, you might start looking at things like Reactor, which is interactivity with animation. Now, I've got some tutorials coming up on Reactor, but the big thing here is Reactor isn't necessarily where the magic happens with the interactivity. It's actually the animator. So if you look into the animator of Unity, and there are plenty of tutorials on that already, I will be adding some soon. But basically, you're controlling which animations are triggered through the Reactor tools. So at the moment, on Enter Trigger and on Exit Trigger, when I do one of these things, I will set a certain animation to happen. So Animator is the magic. And Reactor Reactor tells Animator what to do. So I'll be adding to the tutorials on that. I think there's one basic one already, but once I get back to Japan, I'll be able to focus a bit more on Reactor. So we'll be doing that as well. What else is there? Ah, shaders. Now this comes up a fair bit. Shaders are what material uses. So here, so we're using a standard shader. This works really well in Mona and does all of the things. That said, it is possible to either create your own or import others from other places. The problem is that the shader has to be WebGL compatible. And this is a big problem with a lot of mintable files. So if you get an asset on the Unity store, a lot of natural assets like trees and bushes, for some reason, use shaders that are not compatible. Unity comes with quite a lot, and some of these are compatible, some of them are not. Unlit, for example, certainly is, but usually for early builders, we recommend just using the standard. And in some cases, how to explain this? So in some cases, the shader will import into Mona fine, but because it's a complex shader, this is not standard, this is an imported one. If it is a complex shader that has a lot of references to other assets, the mintable file process will only reach to the first layer. So it doesn't reach to the second, and therefore those shaders will break. So it's always good to do a quick mintable file test to make sure that your asset works in that process. Otherwise, it will be pink. And I'm sure you've seen that pink in the Discord. But yeah, it can be problematic. I'll say that much. So if you're making shaders, they have to be WebGL compatible. Now, if you want to make your own, you can program them if you're a crazy person, or just good at programming. Programmable, I guess that works. Or you can I use Amplify, which is a node-based tool to create shaders. That does turn up on the what do you call it? The Unity store, or Shader Forge, which is free, I think, and that allows you another node-based shader creation tool. So you can make your own shaders for whatever reason. I've done some with what did I do? So you could change certain colors on an asset. Did some cool animation. It's an amazing tool. You can do amazing things with shaders. I'm not technical enough to be able to do the amazing things, but I can do some basics. So shaders are just a higher level element of how do I show the not just textures. What algorithms are involved in putting information on an asset? I'll put that in. That's the technical version of shaders. Someone has a better description, then feel free. So shaders are very useful. All right, we've got a question here. Now, post-processing filters. Yes, you can. We have PVV, and thanks for reminding me on that, because let's rearrange some of this. So shaders are higher level stuff. So we're going to put it up. Maybe materials. Yeah. Cool. Now, so what you're looking at is post-processing filters. What you can do at the moment is use a player property volume. And there is a tutorial on this, and this has access to the post-processing filters that are accessible if you press escape, I think it is. So you'll have access to bloom, you'll have access to other things. Hang on. Settings. There we go. So I got bloom, motion blur, chromatic aberration, and field of view, I think, as well as jump, height, and gravity, and things like that. So you can do that now. So you would put a box over the whole environment, for example, and then you have complete control over that. So it is possible. We also just recently added Michael Bayness. Lens flare, that's the one. So you can put lens flare on assets as well. So let's put that in there. Bloom. What was it? Bloom, motion blur, chromatic aberration. Bloom, motion blur, chromatic aberration. And I think field of view is in there as well. Then you can also do jump height for the character. You could do gravity. You could do walk speed and run speed. I think those are all the ones that are in there at the moment. So if you put a player property volume somewhere in your space, it could be small, it could be the whole thing. That allows you to control those elements in the space. So player property volumes are pretty cool. All right. What else is there? Let's have a look at the. What do we got? Textures, shaders, others are resources. Don't need those. Right. Of course, portals, artifacts, and canvases. Those all have tutorials. Of course, you would need those. Happy to help, Brian. Thank you for asking. Warp volumes. We can add warp volumes now. Basically allowing you to teleport a character anywhere in the space. And we got all those. Skybox. We actually need to do that as well. So let's put that under maybe here. So the skybox just allows you to modify the environment. It's a fixed object. So like the perspective of it is kind of tricky to get your head around. And usually it's hard, it's quite difficult to transition between your 3D world and the skybox in a natural way. There are some ways to work around it. So putting some trees or like maybe some texture work between the space and the skybox. So it looks like the parallax effect can work. There are ways around it. But yes, you can customize your skybox. Once again, that's a tutorial that has been added down here, if I recall. Add a custom skybox. So light mapping, we were talking about that before. Reflection probes, light probes, animation in Unity or animation in Blender. Trim sheets, that's the thing. We did not do that. I would put trim sheets kind of under unwrapping. So trim sheets are an extremely useful tool in creating like one material to work throughout an entire asset just by really good unwrapping. I think I have a tutorial on it somewhere, but here's an example. So on this tutorial, on this material, we have sort of different areas. So we have a wall, we have a roof, we have some tiling brick, and we have some wood. We also have the different maps. So we have metallic and smoothness, we have our normal map. And this whole building was made with that one texture, simply by changing the UV to where it is on that space. Now, as noted, reducing the number of draw calls or materials is kind of crucial in creating a fast frames per second on a complex space. So using trim sheets allows you to make relatively complicated, this is a simple example, but relatively complicated examples with much less materials. So trim sheets are super useful, and I recommend them. Other things you can use in optimizing your space is a doc that does in this, like level of detail. So let's put that in there as well. Where would we put this? Probably down the bottom. Level of detail is a tool that allows you to create, let's say, 4 different assets of different polygon counts and textures that scale down over distance. So if you had a character or a statue, let's use a statue. So let's say you had a very complicated statue with a nice normal map, and it was really big in the space. Then you would need that to be sort of a high polygon asset, or higher. Definitely not sculpted. You want to get that down. But when you get close, you want to see that sort of poly count so that it doesn't look too sharp. Now, the further it gets away, that detail does not need to be there. So level of detail allows you to optimize your object over distance. So you could like halve the poly count over distance, depending on what you want it to do. So that's a very important tool for optimizing your space. Draw calls, these are things like, is a whole category. I would recommend watching this tutorial on optimizing draw calls, but you can do things like making them static, making them occluded, so the computer only needs to think about it when you can see it, and things like that. So you need to reduce the number of materials. You need to instance materials if you can. Static batching allows Unity to optimize objects in your space, and combining assets in the original 3D tool. There's lots of different techniques for that. The next one you want to do is texture compression. So, of course, we all know that the maximum file size is 180 meg, which is quite high for a lot of metaverses. That said, it is still quite limited, depending on what you want to do. So, of course, the maximum resolution of a texture, let's put this up here. Yeah, in here. So for the most part, apart from the skybox, you're looking at max 2048 by 2048. And then, of course, you want smaller if possible. Now, you can change this in Unity. So if I have a texture, do I have one in here? I do not. So let's pull in a texture. Yeah, so let's do 2048 10. So just drag that in there, like so. Okay. So on the asset itself, you can actually edit the size of it here. So I can make this 2048, which is what the original is. But if I wanted to, I can go 64, and you'll see that it gets really small. And you can do that. But the problem is when you put it into your asset, so I can actually put it on here. It will not be great. And as you can see, it not so excellent there. So you have the ability to adjust your assets accordingly. And once again, because I haven't unwrapped this, it's a bit all over the shop. But if I go to the material, you can see the quality there. So it is possible to do that. Now, before minting, however, if I reduce this down to, like, say 256, because that looks fine, I would then go into Photoshop and reduce the actual file size down, because the mintable file will take the original size. The playground files will take the updated size, but the mintable files will keep the original size, which is much bigger. So this is 5.3 meg, but if you have 256, that's 85K. So these are sort of different things that you need to use or consider when looking at your assets. So yes, so smaller if possible. Can be changed in Unity, but then update original file No, not there. Before mintable file. Don't need to, but because the mintable file is a 2 gig limit. But once again, I personally just recommend keeping it as low as possible. Otherwise, you got 2 gigs sitting around on the ether. So we have that. Next. That's texture. We've got all that there. The last thing we're looking at is occlusion culling. Now, what this means is basically if the computer can't see it, don't make it. This is the technical term of hide things I can't see. If I had like 10 objects in a row and the front object is very big, the other 9 objects would be rendered by Unity unless you tell it not to do so. So occlusion culling is another tool that allows you to hide objects, therefore optimize your space as needed. So we have that. I think that's about it, actually. Yeah. Any questions from the chat? A lot of stuff. No? No questions? You all know everything? Probably. Some of you do. Some of you know more than me. So there's that. We do what we can. What was it? Is there any other volumes? No, those are the 3. I guess we could actually put in the other ones as well. So portals will link to other minted spaces. Artifacts, I think, are very good for just hyperlinks in a space. Eventually, we'll be looking at being able to take them, like modify them and take them out and stuff like that. But I personally like to think of them more as hyperlinks at the moment until that functionality gets added. So basically, an artifact can link to any website. And then, of course, canvases, which allow, what is it, JPEG, PNG, and GIF now. Because Alv's a legend. It doesn't need to be 3. And video coming soon. Let's do that. So, for example, you should be able to put Canvas down now, and in the future, we'll be able to add video to it. I believe that is the functionality that we'll be doing. Alv can prove me wrong. But yeah, so he's got that. So I put an animated GIF there for now, and then we can do the video later. Alrighty. Let me quickly check something. Where is it? There. Did I miss anyone? I don't think so. Cool. Alrighty. So basically, this is a list of everything. The main thing of all of this at the moment, like this looks like a lot, but the main thing that needs to be considered is, yeah, happy to help Studio Supers. If you have any questions, feel free. I got some time up my sleeve, so happy to look at any particular thing that you would like to know. Because this is kind of done. The main one, I think that, like, of all of these things that we've looked at, this one is probably modeling assets is probably the thing that is weakest for people coming in from other spaces because they don't get that poly count down. So on that, so many things. One thing that might come up is what you call retopology. Retopology can be, how would you explain this? Retopology is redoing the polygon count on an asset. You could either do the asset that you're making, or you can kind of trace a high polygon asset for a low polygon asset to get it down to a low polygon. So retopology is a tool, a method, not even a tool, method to reduce or improve poly count in some way. So, nope, wrong one again. There we go. So retopology is another method for creating that. Now, amplify. Good question. It's not hard to use. It's actually very easy to use. The hard part is the knowledge that you need to use it well. For example, if you're a programmer, I think it's much easier because you have a lot of the algorithmic logic, if that makes sense. So you understand vectors, you understand like math better than I do. That said, as a designer, I've been able to do some really cool stuff either through tutorials online, or I have a specific idea of what I want to do. For example, being able to customize certain areas of an asset. I think I actually have it, so I could give it a shot. Why not? Package manager, my assets, see if it works. Like, it'll take a second to get in, but I could do a quick run through, very quick run through. Shader it again. Download. The internet in this place is so cool. Import. And then import. Okay. Now, I'm going to have to quickly brush up and remember how to do any of this. I am in LA at the moment. I got stuck in LA because I caught COVID at the end of New York NFT. So basically, I'm sort of hunkering down for the week and a bit before my flight out because Japan requires a negative result from PCR or NAAT. So I need to do that. I do live in Japan, yes. I'm in Osaka. So trying to get back there, but currently in LA. One thing you could look into is Shader Forge. So Shader Forge is free. And I believe it's basically the same thing. I haven't used it, so I can't really help you with it much. But that is something you could look into 100%. So Shader Forge. Let's see. How do I shader? Yeah, amplify surface shader. Cool. Tutorial. Yeah. Opening shader editor. There we go. Okay, cool. I'm going to put this up here. Okay. So this quick tutorial on Amplify. Yeah, Shader Forge is free and similar to Amplify. Hey, Android game, how's it going? So Shader Forge is free. I think it's older, so I'm not sure. Like, I literally am not sure if they are still updating it, whereas Amplify is an asset store sort of thing that they have like more support and stuff for. So pros and cons to both. But yeah, you can look at that. So how do you even start on Amplify? It's such a big thing. There's a lot you can do. So if you go into a space, let's move this across a bit more. So we've got that. So the thing is, like, these are all the things you can do. I can right mouse click. I can search. I honestly don't know what half of this stuff does. Like, I think noise is a thing. Let's do that. Noise generator. Put it on the albedo, and like I just don't know enough. Voronoi, I know that one. That's a thing. Is that a thing I can do? After every addition, you need to update it here. So I got that. But I'm not. Oh, there we go. Too big. Yeah, it was better before. 10. Okay, that's cool. Ta-da! No, all good, all good. Yes. So what basically it is, you have a bunch of nodes which represent, let's say, a bit of code, right? So I can grab the camera depth fade, I can grab the screen color, I can grab like constants and properties, so I can put these in. So say, for example, I could put a color up here. And then I can sort of show that as a property. Right? And what that does is, let's get rid of that, is when I save it, I have a material. So let's put this as my new material, which is, where would that be? Hang on. General? Yeah, here we go. TME. Yeah, there we go. Save that. So if I go up to my shader, I can try and find there, TME tutor. And now, because this is sort of a property, I can change this over here, which allows me to, anything that is a property I can animate, which means I could do some really interesting things with Reactor if I wanted to. But say, for example, what else can I do? So you got colors, floats, gradients, like all the sort of standard vector things. I do not want that. What else is there? You can do, like, there's just hundreds of tools that allow you to create whatever you want. So you can use blends, you can do RGB to HSV. And if you're a programmer, this is like, you know what this is. I do not, because I just want to make and learn certain things. So I can do if this equals that, if this equals that. So in a way, you could actually do some pretty solid programmatical, is that a word, elements on a shader. And actually on that, yes. So if you go into Unity, so if I do this, so if I went into, let's animator. So let's grab animator. Let's do a quick thing on that, shall we? Animation. Go down there. And animator. I can go down there as well. So let's say we've got this and we have our little animated thing here. Go to animation. Go to create. Put that in the animations. So let's go, let's just say green. Now, if I put this on recorder, anything I animate will be tracked, right? So at the moment, I want this to be green. So I'm going to put that there. And that's just one frame. And then I'm going to add a new clip. And let's say red. Record that. And just make it red so it knows that it's there. So notice how this is red. So that means is animated. So we have our animator. Right mouse click, make transition to there, make transition to there, make a parameter. So let's go just a Boolean today. So switch with a capital C. So I'm going to turn exit off, switch to true, exit off, switch to false. Now, of course, I could animate it directly, but this won't happen until I go into an animator. So let's put a quick reactor in there, shall we? So I'm just going to put an empty, call that reactor, switch, add component, reactor. Nope, spelling, monoreactor. So on exit, on enter, we want this object, which has, no, not that object, that object. So you have to make sure that you drag in the object with the animator. Okay, cool. Yeah, sorry, I've only got one screen, so I have to bounce between the chat and this as well. Okay, cool. Yep. Excellent. Jump back in. Okay, so you have to make sure that the asset with the animator is the one that goes onto the switch. So I forget which one it was. Space main animator, this one here. So switch, space main, and put that there. Update, what's going on? Okay, it's not liking that. I'm gonna remove that and play it again. Monoreactor, there we go. Okay. Yeah, why? That's why? It's never done this before. Messy, interesting. Okay, so you're gonna have to bear with me on this one because it's a bit messy. But space main, you want to drag that to hopefully the first one. We want to set. Okay, hang on. I'm gonna save this and then reboot it because that's getting a bit messy. Hopefully that'll work. Try again. Away. Okay, let's see if this works. No, why? Space main. Okay, we can sort of see it. I apologize for this. So the name is purely the top thing. So switch to red, and then you can see the top there. That's all that is. We want to set, and I can do all interesting things, but we just want to set it. Space main, which has the animator. Parameter, which I was switch with a capital. And we want the Boolean. Oh no. Why? Hang on. Okay. I can't do it because I can't see it. So either way, that would be value type down to Boolean. And then I would type in true, TRUE. And then I would add, can't even add. Why is it so weird? Okay, that's annoying. So, yeah. There is a reactive tutorial. I've done workshops on it before. I wish I could tell you, but I'm not sure how to fix that particular issue. Yes. So basically, what I would do is because the amplify shader has the color as a property, I can animate that property and then be able to do really cool stuff with Reactor on top of that. So, yeah, super useful. But yeah, so when it comes to the nodes, the things you can do here are crazy. You can modify vertices, so you can do some really interesting stuff. Actually, let's pull up the that's not gonna work. Where's the sculpture space? There are 5 things that Rail did in the sculpture challenge, and I don't know how they've done it, but it's amazing. So let me see. Where's the sculpture? This one. Cool. Now I don't know if this person created them in Amplify or they programmed it, but I can show you the magic of shaders. So this one, that one, this one, and this pink one, and that one there, the animated one. These are shaders. Like that is a cube, and I don't know how they've done it. So shaders are crazy powerful. But yeah, there's an art to them 100%. But say, for example, if you did sort of that sort of stuff where like maybe there's a computation that allows it to animate, you could have a still and an animated if you made it an open property, and then you could animate that. So yeah, there's shaders is a whole category. Like you have professionals that like they only do shaders and they make the amazing things. I don't know any of it. So you're on your own there. That said, Amplify is a great tool for like designers who don't program to sort of meet halfway. And of course, there's a lot of tutorials on how to make your own. I've done a cool sort of speaker. Where's that one? Resources. Where's resources? Yeah. So I can show you what I've done with some basic shaders. So that water, for example, is a shader that allows you some really cool animation, refraction, and stuff. The like hologram effects were done with shaders. The scrolling animation was done just like animating UV over time. And there's a flick book, so it sort of goes through like that 16 that 1 to 16 is one material and it just moves across X amount because I know how much stuff. And the speaker boom down there with the animation that is also done with a shader. So yeah, shaders are crazy powerful, especially if you know anything about maths and algorithms and all that sort of stuff. That said, there are plenty of tutorials on like taking it to stomach certain extremes, which is really, really cool. So highly recommend getting into it. That said, yeah, once you open a property, you can therefore animate that using you can animate that, but you can do some really cool stuff with Reactor. Oh yeah, shaders are a thing. This is 100% a thing. It's crazy what you can do with them. That said, and I mentioned this earlier, like the shaders that Mona allows has to be WebGL compatible. So there are certain nodes that Mona does not like. I do not know which ones they are. I'm not technical enough to find out. But yeah, there are problems there. A lot of shaders also have codependencies, like they have, like it's looking for a script elsewhere, and the mintable file will break that connection because it only goes, when it's pulling all the files, it will pull the things that the asset requires, but not what the sub asset requires. So there are some problems with that sort of thing. That said, if you're playing with shaders, you're probably not going to do that. So that's fine. So there's that. So super powerful and yeah, crazy, crazy cool stuff to play around with if you get a chance. This jumping castle is an example of animation, PPVs, Reactor, like it's all in one. So the animation is done with blend shapes. I've got 4 sections that will animate depending on where I hit it. So if I land on it, it will sort of make that animation. But yeah, so by combining, that's the one. By combining PPV animation, you can do some really cool, very powerful effects. And I'm really interested to see when people get to that point where they start doing crazy stuff with a lot of that. So yeah, the playground's basically used to sort of teach a lot of these sort of things to see them in action. I have to add warp zones, so I'll probably be doing that once I get back home. And yeah, get back into the tutorial creation process. But for here, yeah, bit tricky. So PBV and Reactor are different things. Um, so you would have like I'm moving my hands as if you could see them. So you would have like a volume or a collider, um, or 2 colliders. So one would be a PBV and one would be a reactor if you were sort of combining them. You could actually, could you? I think you could actually put a PPV and a reactor on the same asset, and it would use that one collider. So you could do it that way, actually. I prefer to keep things sort of separate. So if I need to edit one, I can just do that. So each asset would be on a different game object, for example. So I would have a PPV game object and then a reactor game object, and then I can control them separately a bit more organized. But once again, it's up to you. Everyone's pipeline is a little different. It's completely up to you how you do it. Right. Yeah, 100%. Let me pull up an example. I think I have the playground here, so I should be able to do that. So let's close this one. Sure. We want to add. Where is it? Take a bit, but we'll get there. Okay. So, what were you after again? So the gravity, let's have a look. It's got a 0G game object with the object in it, but also a PPV game object. So this is just an empty game object with player properties volume on it and a box collider. Box colliders need to be a trigger, like is trigger, for PPVs to work. Otherwise, I can't get into it. And I just adjust all of these. So in this case, if it's -1, it's what the default is, but I set the gravity to 0. So if I jump into it, and it will continue my action or direction with that. So that's basically it. That's how PPV works. Now over here, this is where it starts getting a little bit more complicated. So we have our castle collider. We have one big collider in the whole asset because it's just one asset, one area of jump bigger. So jump height is like double, I think. If you roll over, it shows you what the default is. So 6.5. So it's about double the jump height. So if I'm inside this collider that is set to trigger, I will jump twice the height of normal. And then I have 4 different reactors. So we have a collider here. So as soon as I touch this and press jump, as soon as I touch this, so on enter trigger, I will play the wobble for this asset. So, and then on exit we'll just set to not. So I have 4 different reactors, depending on where I bounce, will animate that piece of that. Yeah, so PPV and Reactor is a script that Mona has created that allows you to do things like this. We don't allow open scripts because of security and a bunch of other reasons, but there are certain scripts that we will allow that allow you to do cool stuff. So like PPVs, like warp colliders, warp volumes and reactor volumes. Yeah, super powerful. And once again, like reactor is not where the magic happens. The magic happens in the animator. So let me pull that up. Where is it? Oh, I have to pull it up again. Hang on. Window, animation, animator. So let's go there. Is that the animator? Yeah, so animator here. Yeah, where'd it go? Right. So this gets a little bit more complicated, but this is a prime example. So animator is where the magic happens, right? So you have your parameters, which is bounce. We've got the castle idle, which is the standard. So when I land in each reactor on enter, it will play that animation. So say, for example, I land here. This animation will play because bounce will equal 1. So when I touch this reactor box, I'm setting this parameter to 1. So front right. So set castle low, bounce integer to 1. And then it will play the animation. And then once it's finished, it will go back to idle unless another box has been hit, and then it will animate those. So this is animator is where reactor's magic actually happens. What reactor is doing is just telling this what to do. So do I go to this animation? Do I go to this animation, this animation, this animation, or back to base? PPV is a lot easier because it's like, if I'm in this box, do things. That's it. But Reactor is much more powerful. And of course, like there are so many parameters that you can animate in Unity. So like shaders, like animation, like you name it. There is so much stuff that you can animate. So if you have different settings and different animations, you can bounce between those using Reactor. At the moment, we have on enter trigger and on exit trigger. We will be adding more to that in the future, such as on interact and on look at, stuff like that. Okay, so the animator, like this. So let me see, bit sideways, but yeah. So you got that sort of shape. So basically, what I've done is in Blender, I will create an animation over time. So I might have like wobble front right, wobble front left, wobble back front, back right, and wobble back, yeah, all of them, and idle. And in Unity, you can cut up those animations to individual ones, like so. So let me see, where is it? Projects, models, so many. Where is it? Castle low. Yeah, here we go. So if you go to animation, is it animation? What? Maybe I did it here actually. So on the skin mesh, for example, I have blend shapes. And I think I just animated those in Unity. So I could do it in Blender, or I could do it here. But blend shapes allow you to do that sort of merging of assets. Yeah, I have a tutorial on that actually. So if you go to, where is it? Here's one we prepared earlier. So animation in Unity and importing animation. Even have the video for it. So yeah, that is there for your perusal. Yeah, no worries about lag. Pretty. I'm getting used to it. It's just like making sure I can keep on top of things. But yeah, like with Reactor and PPV, like yeah, and also warp volumes. I'm interested to see what people do with warp volumes. But yeah, the potential for these three, and we're going to of course add more and more interesting tools forever. So it's just like seeing what people do with them. I'm really interested to see what happens. Okay, so yeah, docs.mona.gallery is your go-to. You've got the get started, which is way up here. Most people see this, but they never look into the rest, and there is so much stuff there. Most of them actually have videos as well. So portals, pages, artifacts, and like there's a lot of stuff that you can use. We will be building on this as we go. So yeah. Definitely a super useful tool moving forward. I don't know how to make this more obvious. So on Mona, we have build a space. And if you click on that, it will actually go to the docs. Maybe we just have to say doc. Not too sure. Oh no, happy to go over it. That said, if you want like more details, like this is like random talking and conversation, so it's a little bit longer than it needs to be. So if you want sort of precision tutorials, then those are the way to go for sure. I appreciate it. Glad you are finding them helpful. Yeah, New York was great. A lot of people sort of were very thankful for the things I've been doing, and I'm like, I just want to help people. I like getting them to create interesting things. So looking to developing tutorials in both directions, more advanced, but also simplified depending on where you're coming from. So there's a lot of directions. There's a lot of content that needs to be made, and that's it. That's my job. So Glad it's working out. Yeah, no, there's a lot of stuff there. We also have a lot of videos are on the Mona channel, like directly. So if you're not a reader and you're a watcher, all the tutorials are just there, ready to go. And of course, you got my channel as well, has all the workshops and the build and chills that I've done since the dawn of time. So yeah, there's a lot of content. The problem with workshops and build and chills is they are like more long content. So a lot of people don't have the time, and I agree, to watch all of that. So basically, it's a bit of a balance between come in and ask questions at these sort of events, but yeah, the tutorials are all there for those. Appreciate it. Glad you're enjoying it. And yeah, like the community is amazing. Like everyone helps everyone. I'm really enjoying the I think we have a good vibe. I think the community is really good. They're all helping each other. We're all sort of growing together, and that's really, really nice. So it's definitely not just me by any means. I'm thankful to anyone who helps. And yeah, I think you're right. The community is amazing with a lot of this sort of stuff. So it's really fun. So yeah, having a ball, basically. But yeah, might wrap it up there. We've got it's 2 hours pretty much on the dot. So that's an excellent time, I think, to wrap this up. Unless you have any other questions that you would like to get to just quickly. All good? Yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing what people like once everyone gets up to the game dev level. So I come from game dev. In a way, like sort of self-taught. I used to work in a game studio before moving to Japan, but I've always loved games. And I've done mods and all that sort of stuff. So once you get a lot of these people, like architects and artists, to the level that they can start creating Mona spaces at the same level of their main skill, that's when we're going to start seeing some really amazing stuff. It's going to be great. Cheers. All right. Thanks all for joining. Feel free to join on the next build and chill. I think I'll probably might be flying out on the Friday, so we'll see how that goes. But thanks for joining. Great questions, and yeah, see you in the Discord. Have a great day. All right, I got to shut this down. I can't do this cool on one screen, so you just have to like deal with the multi-dimensional screen here. All right, wrapping up. Have a good